ICICI Lombard and CNBC-TV18 present India Risk Management Awards, Risk Masterclass.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you today to the third masterclass brought to you by ICICI Lombard General Insurance and CNBC-TV18. I am Paromita Chatterjee. As we enter a new decade, disruptive technologies promise new solutions, further innovation, and new ways to connect with our customers and markets. But as with any opportunity for growth, they also bring with it risks that businesses need to start considering urgently. It has become critical for organizations to understand the risks presented by these up-and-coming technologies so that professionals in risk management, corporate security, and information security can begin to build strategies and initiatives to prepare their businesses to embrace and make the most of these technologies. Today's masterclass focuses on redefining risks for e-commerce and startups in a post-COVID-19 environment and how companies can develop risk management strategies to manage or mitigate these risks. First up, I would like to welcome Mr. Yash Parashari, Vice President, Structured Products Group, to share his thoughts on how the current landscape of innovation shows that risk management practices need to change if organizations are to capture value from new technologies and novel initiatives.
Generally, the fundamental business is largely stable, predictable, and risk is a big variable, which is a known challenge to manage. Whereas in this case, both businesses and risks are variable, and hence it becomes difficult to manage the same and disrupt at the same time. This disruption is important because if these companies fall behind innovation curve and do not challenge their status quo, they may fall to traditional businesses, which have deeper pockets and distribution reach to beat these new age companies. And not leveraging risk would be the biggest risk. Some of the key risks that I look forward to are cybersecurity and privacy risks. For instance, many of the startups take blanket approvals and access personal information of users. Quite often, this is irrespective of the fact whether it is required or not. The challenge is, while these companies channelize their capital in business development, the security systems are often neglected. As a result, data confidentiality becomes an issue. This leads to compromised customer privacy, and it is bad for their business as well. A very important factor is this also limits their company's ability to expand globally, where privacy rules and regulations are much stricter, like in Europe or in US. The second aspect that I look forward in this talk show is on talent risk. As organizations push forward with technology deployment, skills too need to be changed. Since these are new technologies, business models, company may not find experienced staff to handle these risks. Hence, it is important on talent sourcing and increasing their knowledge base and retain talent. I also look forward to discussion on the risk management strategies for startups through the sector agnostic basis, as in adaptability. Every situation is new and different. However, cross-business idea pollination and adaptive learning can help these companies. The business ideas and USPs can be challenged by regulations. You will remember in mid-2015, one of the wallet company had a dominant market share and it got challenged because government allowed UPI. And today is the situation where they are not the market leaders. So adaptability with the changing trends is very, very important. Another aspect that we look forward is on agility. We know that reinventing is the key in this business. And there are numerous examples around us. There are many successful companies, those who have done things in an agile method and taken their business from X to 10X. I take an example of Dropbox. They tried multiple things to increase their customer base, but they kept a close track on the effectivity of each of their marketing campaigns. This rich data insight gave them ultimate gold strike, which was a pure referral program, which was unheard of in the digital world.
Thank you, Mr. Yash Parashari, for those valuable insights. Next, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for the evening, Mr. Vivek Gupta, co-founder of Licious, to share with us his thoughts on the importance of risk management strategies for startups and e-commerce companies, especially in this new normal.
if you ask me, anybody was prepared to handle COVID? I think everybody is dreaming about it. I don't think across the globe you can be ready to handle a pandemic kind of situation. It is just your systems, processes, your ideology, your thinking, how will you manage during that time, and maybe just belief and courage which will help you navigate some of these unforeseen things which happen. You would have heard stories of that, COVID is born out of China from the fish market or meat market. I think some of those rumors be negated, because during that time we grew very, very rapidly. In last 15-18 months, we have actually grown 5x. So it's not that people were not following that rumor. People were just appreciating quality in this meat ecosystem, and they were looking for quality choices. So COVID kind of situations just make you appreciate some of these things which we were ignoring in the past. And let me a little bit double down on the supply chain piece, which we did very, very differently. On day one of COVID, when people were figuring out how to operate, we were actually solving for health and safety of our own people, which were running our backend. We placed close to 1,000 people in hotels with their families, assured them salaries, food, 3 times food, etc. So that these people could trust the organization and be ready to operate. COVID is one example, that how a world can suddenly change. But there can be many more things which can come in future. So build organizations in such a way that you can, these brands or these companies outlast all of us. And that will only happen when you sitting today solve for tomorrow.
ICICI Lombard and CNBC-TV18 present India Risk Management Awards, Risk Masterclass.
Next up for our panel discussion, I would like to welcome our esteemed guests for the evening, Mr. Sandeep Goradia, Head Corporate Solutions Group of ICICI Lombard General Insurance, Anuj Bhansali, Head Trust and Safety at PhonePe, and MS Shan, Chief Growth Officer at JusPay. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this masterclass today. So, Sandeep, let me start with you. And my first question is, what are the key technology and innovation-based risks that have emerged for startups and e-commerce companies over this fast-paced growth of digitization and innovation that we've seen over the last 1 year or so?
India, in fact, has now emerged as one of the biggest and the fastest adopters of digital technologies among the major economies that we have. And India's young population has further propelled India to the forefront of digital innovation. In fact, along with the lockdown and work from home scenario which has evolved over the last 1.5 years, the internet and digitization has increased enormously, which has given rise to the entire digital ecosystem that we see today. I was just looking at some numbers, and it gladdens my heart to see that the internet penetration has gone up by more than 12 crore or so. User base has gone up over the last 1.5 years during this COVID period. And if you look at the aggregate numbers, it has reached almost more than 100 crore users and subscriber base. And what has been the most fascinating aspect of this entire growth has been that this shift has really happened from the rural India. So out of this entire user base, we are seeing almost more than 40% of users coming from rural India, which basically shows that this trend is here to last. It is much more broad-based than being contributed by certain advanced cities and towns. This entire trend has really given the thrust to the digital ecosystem and the entire e-commerce. So to speak of numbers, we have about 50,000 odd startups being registered, and every month we are seeing more and more new startups which are coming into the ecosystem. And within the e-commerce space itself, we are having almost 20% or more are being actually active in the e-commerce space. Along with this entire space, we have also seen restriction of the physical movement, which has led to the consumers resorting to online shopping and online payment. Of course, the gentleman from PhonePe and JusPay will be able to add more details around this entire trend. But if you look at the overall numbers, the entire number of UPI transactions have actually crossed 4 billion over the last 1 year, with the entire total value being moved is more than $1.5 trillion.
Right.
So while digitalization and innovation has given rise to a plethora of opportunities, we also need to take a note of a lot of these emerging technologies. Because these emerging risks for these technologies, because unless and until you manage these risks, it is very difficult to sustain this growth.
Let me come to you, Anuj, on that point of risk, because clearly business is booming, and with every growth strategy, also one has to address the risk strategy. Now, let's focus a little bit on cyber risk, because looking at some of the technologies which are being used, the innovative solutions that you've come up with, how have you as a company sort of dealt with this issue of cyber security risk?
So, thanks for having me here. Digital adoption has gone manifold, right? It's been a rapid rise. So cybersecurity and securing our users, especially given it's a fintech environment, is really, really important for us. What we have seen around is normally there are like 2 or 3 different kinds of risks that originate even in the cybersecurity side. One is your end consumer, right? At the end of the day, you make sure that customers trust you, their payments are safe and secure. That's been our primary focus out. Second is towards the company in itself, which is you have merchants, you have customers. How do you make sure that all of your environments are risk-free? Third is towards the entire end of the company getting misused, let's say, from the bad actors out. And that could be a part of an AML risk, that could be a part of fraud risks, any of those that come in. What we have done is we have an in-house inbuilt application. We knew especially that the modes that we will be operating in from day one will be real-time transaction monitoring, will be real-time risk evaluation. And the scales will be something that we hope to, and thankfully we have achieved that, is that the scales is something that most of the world wouldn't have seen. So we ended up designing and building our own internal risk systems, which look into almost every single aspect of PhonePe, be it a logging, be it a transaction monitoring, be it any of the post actions around on that. And we have basically simplified our systems using the machine learning algorithms, the rule conditions for each of these transaction monitoring out. The other thing that we have done is from a day one, the entire model for our tech ecosystem has been a zero trust model. Each of the services that talk internally have to have the right tokens, have to have the right access levels. And thankfully, our teams have been good enough to take care of this from day zero, so that it's not an afterthought, but more around how we design the core systems that they take care of the security in itself. To give you some simple examples, each of our subsystems have their own authentication system. So even if somebody, let's say, tampers a request from outside, one of our internal systems will fail the request, saying that the request does not match the genuine transaction flow or the genuine request flows out.
Very interesting, Anuj, that you're saying that essentially you built the zero trust model, particularly when it comes to designing your own application. Let me go across to Shan. Shan, what was the model that you adopted, not just to address, cyber security risk, but as Sandeep was mentioning, there's regulatory risk, there is, risk to as far as the cultural aspect is concerned, the operational risks. I mean, how did you address all these risks that came alongside the kind of phenomenal growth that you've seen?
So I think Sandeep and Anuj pointed about the massive growth that's been happening on the digitization front. And JusPay being one of the prominent players in this today. For example, we are one of the front runners of UPI, which is doing more than 4 billion transactions a month. So security is a very, very important aspect as well. So suppose if you look at India payment methodology, it's one of the most complex, at the same time most innovative from the point of view of how we are looking at payments. In that sense, we at JusPay, one, we'll have to take care of the security aspects of we as a company. Also for our merchants, providing the right kind of infrastructure, right kind of security aspects is very important. So we follow 3 guiding principles. One is like how can we create the depth, essentially creating multiple layers and multiple independent barriers so that the data or the security is not compromised in any way. Second is granularity. How do you create smaller and avoiding the single point of susceptible failure or breach in whatever way possible. The last is what we call it as minimize. So as much as possible, anonymize the data, unless it is required, right, don't store any data, ensure that there is encryption of data at whatever way possible. So just to recap, create multiple independent barriers, give very granular, smaller access to people as possible, and minimize as much as data exposure as possible. So this can be done either at the by design level or at the process level or at the people level as well. Maybe I'm pretty sure we can, during the course of the discussion, we can get into each of these details and how we at JusPay or for our merchants, how we implement some of these things to take care of the security.
Sandeep, you want to weigh in here in terms of the strategy that ICICI Lombard has adopted? I mean, is risk a growth enabler? How do you balance between it being a growth enabler while at the same time being an impediment to some of the risk factors that you brought up?
I would look at it, the entire corporate space, into three broad buckets. There is one bucket which is where you have a lot of these large evolved organizations over the last 20, 25 years, large successful organizations, listed organizations, who have very well-defined risk management framework in place, right? So they would have invested in people, processes, frameworks over a period of time, and they would also have a say even at the board level. There is another bucket which is a lot of these mid-corporate clients, typically in the region of about 5,000 odd crore kind of a segment, wherein all of these companies are in the growth phase. They are evolving their entire business models at a very fast pace. Where while they realize that they need to work on all of these physical risk aspect, data breaches, kind of emerging kind of risks which are there, natural catastrophe related risks which are there. But we have seen, these companies lacking in terms of the expertise. Okay, so at times they depend a lot on channel partners like, you have brokers, you have agency, and they also interact directly with insurance companies. And then the third emerging segment is this entire startup ecosystem, which is really coming up very, very fast. So for them, clearly, it's the business opportunity which is there in front of them. Most of the time they miss, some of these, risk areas that they need to be cautious about. And that is one segment that we as a company are investing very heavily in terms of, developing various modules to reach out to them, make them understand what kind of risks that they have, what are the solutions that they have, what are the risks which are insurable, which risks are not insurable, make them aware about it, and also present insurance as a tool or as an enabler for their own business.
So clearly, I think what we're hearing is that both of you have, put technology at the center of your strategy, but also ensuring that the trust element is there with some of those processes that you've adopted. In fact, let me go back to Anuj in terms of the role of technology, because technology can be a foe and friend because it depends in whose hands and how effectively it is used. How did you as an organization really approach technology, looking at the fast pace of seeing how the environment is changing? If you can just explain that strategy to us.
So, we have always considered technology as a friend. If you look at it, our initial teams were very, very small in size, right? We started with a very simple principle: simplify and implement. Let's not keep people occupied for the reason of just being occupied out for work. We will automate as much as possible. And to do those automations, we had to understand a lot of the technology that we were going to build out. The idea was always about, at scale, none of the human capital systems can actually work 24/7. And that is where we'll have to have very, very technology-oriented solutions, which will come in, which will automate. A very simple example that we had seen and implemented, be it a consumer or a merchant, when they reach out to us, we would basically automate most of those flows out. So today, over 80% of the queries, right, even if a customer were to reach out to PhonePe, they get automated and auto-responded by the use of technology rather than, let's say, having people to go in through the issues. Because we realized each of the systems that were self-sufficient, independent, had almost all the knowledge. We just had to build the right workflows to make sure the customer queries get addressed as soon as possible.
Now, along with rapidly changing technology has also been the changing regulations. Perhaps you'd like to bring up, some aspects of the risks that it posed and how to overcome them effectively.
Yeah, so I was just talking about, various emerging risks which are happening because of this huge trend of digitization which is taking place. Because at the end of the day, risks are there to be managed so that, there is no impediments to the sustainable growth that we are seeing at this point in time. So one of the, biggest risks that, or the first one which comes into mind, which I was mentioning earlier, was the regulatory part of it. And some of the, experiences which have happened over the last 1.5 years, shows that we still have some way to go. Apart from that, over the last 1.5 years, we have seen, periodical changes in the lockdown guidelines. Because, startups had to undergo a lot of change in their entire core business model, depending upon those changes that we are seeing coming from the authorities. So that is one. The second thing which clearly I think, my colleagues, shared about data privacy. Data privacy and breaches, this is one of the hottest topics which is being discussed at the board of most of the companies. Today consumer data privacy and breach has increased as the hackers have started to see a huge opportunity due to the increase in digitization. There has been numerous breaches that has happened, which has come into the public domain. Like, for example, we have seen Big Basket, Domino's, Air India, and even MobiKwik. Some of these names have come in the public domain, but again, there are numerous names which have not even come in the public domain. In fact, year 2021 is known to be a year where we have seen the maximum, data breaches events actually happening. Consumer data like KYC, emails, and phone numbers are getting leaked, and which is kind of available in the dark web. So that is another big area of concern.
Shan, what keeps you awake at night when it comes to risk?
Having an understanding that, okay, these are the possible risks that can happen, and ensuring that right kind of teams, right kind of process in place gives us a little bit of a comfort. But despite that, I think the most important thing is like, okay, we for example, we have a 24/7 monitoring system that kind of looks at every kind of transaction data. For us, since we are in a payment tech, right, I think the transaction data and everything is very, very critical. So putting in the right kind of monitoring system, creating alerts, like for example, the Slack will be buzzing in case, not just from a security point of view, but from a reliability point of view as well.
Very comprehensive answers and very interesting approaches as far as risk management is concerned. We've completely run out of time, but gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this special session. Goodbye and thank you for watching.
ICICI Lombard and CNBC-TV18 present India Risk Management Awards, Risk Masterclass. Focus, ideas, innovate, enable.